Okay, so last week, the woman who sold Ashley Biden's diary to the press was sentenced to a month in prison as punishment for this quote unquote crime of stealing Ashley Biden's diary. Now, as far as I'm concerned, this is yet another example of just how our two-tiered system of justice operates. Where if you're someone who is politically protected by the establishment or the uni party, your experience with the justice system is completely different from someone who isn't. Case in point, if you look at the circumstances under which the woman came into possession of this diary, it's hard to describe that as her having stolen it. Basically, it was left at a vacation rental property by Ashley Biden. Then, when the woman came to stay there, she found it. Now, if it had been a situation where Miss Biden got in touch with her and said, "Oh, I left this there, it's my property, can you send it back to me?" and the woman refused, then I suppose you could argue that she in effect stole it. But in this circumstance, there was no such situation that occurred. She found it, recognized that it was something that the press would be interested in, and sold it to the press. As far as I'm concerned, that's, finding abandoned property. Yet the courts saw this quite differently, and she's going to have to spend a month in prison for it. Because what it comes down to is that when someone is protected, as I mentioned before, the courts will find any justification for ruling in ways that either lets them off the hook or is unfairly prosecutorial to those who are their opponents or those who are on the other side of an argument with them. I mean, just look at how President Trump has been treated. We're having situations where laws are being interpreted in completely novel ways in order to bring him to trial. We're seeing situations where court cases, which would normally be dismissed, are still continuing. Just take, for example, the case in Georgia, in Fulton County, brought by District Attorney Fannie Willis. We have a situation where not only has the district attorney been shown to have a serious conflict of interest, as far as I'm concerned, even though the judge is arguing that it's only an appearance of conflict of interest. Appearance of conflict of interest should be enough to get Fannie Willis removed from the case, yet the judge did not do that. Plus the fact that Fannie Willis and Nathan Wade basically perjured themselves on the witness stand. It's inconceivable that the case is going to continue to proceed after that with them with her, since he was made to resign. Yet that is what's happening. Now, looking at the case in New York, which just went to trial, you have a situation where the Attorney General, Letitia James, ran her campaign on the promise that if elected, she would get Trump. Now, this is before her having done any investigation, seeing any evidence that he was guilty of anything. But she's basically coming with a preconceived idea that he must be guilty of something and that she will find out what it is and prosecute him for it. I mean, that's completely unreasonable. I mean, the case should be thrown out on the grounds of that alone, that it is a politically targeted persecution as opposed to a legitimate prosecution. Not only that, but when you look at the situation with the judge in the case, his daughter is actually a political activist, part of a group who is trying their hardest to get President Biden reelected. And obviously, if Trump were to be found guilty, it would damage his chances of being elected. So there's a clear conflict of interest there. That again is another reason why the case should be dismissed, or maybe better, the judge should be removed and it should go to another judge. And then there's a question of whether Trump can even get a fair trial in New York City. The district where this case is being heard is, I think it was something like 75% went for Biden. And surely they will realize that finding him guilty would damage his chances of winning the election over President Biden. So there, the jury itself would have a conflict of interest. Also, I just saw a report from the first day of the trial where over 100 jurors had to be dismissed because they said they could not be unbiased. So, I mean, that just sounds incredible to me. 100 dismissed for bias? I mean, those are the ones that are being honest about their bias. How many aren't being honest? Surely there's no way you're going to end up with a really fair and unbiased jury here. And that's another reason why the case should not be allowed to proceed, or at least should be moved away from this jurisdiction. Lastly, there's also the issue with the charges themselves. At the core of it, he's being charged with falsifying a business record, in that he labeled what was essentially a hush money payment as a legal fee payment. So I guess they're saying that that was fraud. Now that raises an interesting question. Is there actually a category for hush money payments? Somehow I don't think there is. So then that raises the question, what should that payment have been labeled as? Clearly we're talking about something that is very subjective here. And not just that, but the statute of limitations on those kind of crimes is 2 years. And this case is being brought to trial well beyond that. Now, the way that they're getting past this statute of limitations is by claiming that, oh, falsely labeling that payment was a campaign finance violation, which is a felony. And so that allows us to prosecute beyond the statute of limitations. Now, there's no established precedent for that kind of thing. But yet again, they're finding an inventive justification to be able to allow their case to proceed. Now, looking at these 4 points which I've just outlined, it's pretty clear that if these were charges, if this was a prosecution that was being brought against President Biden or any other politically protected, uniparty protected, establishment protected politician, any of those reasons would be seen as justification to dismiss the case, remove the judge, get the venue moved, etc., etc. But because it's Trump, suddenly none of these reasons are good enough. And that there is just another example of how our system is two-tiered. They'll use any justification that they can come up with to bring charges against Trump. But for someone else, say a Biden, whether that be a Joe Biden or Hunter Biden, they'll use any justification they can come up with not to bring charges or to dismiss a case or whatever else. So that's the situation that we're in. What do we do about it? Well, I think the first thing, the most obvious thing, is to vote accordingly. Now, I was actually someone who was not really enthused about President Trump running a second time and would much rather have seen DeSantis be the nominee. But after all of these prosecutions were brought, after all of these charges were filed, I suppose there's a certain sick pleasure that I would get from seeing President Trump be elected president again, if for no other reason than to tell the people who are weaponizing the legal system against him to go and pound sand. Anyway, those are my thoughts. Let me know what yours are in the comments, and I will see you in the next video.